In this video, I want to cover the differences between the US work culture and the UK work culture, and in particular when it comes to business, entrepreneurship, things like that. Now, because we're comparing two massive countries, there'll be some generalizations. I know there's some difficulties in the US, which I won't cover, like having to effectively need a car to drive to get to anywhere compared to the UK, where you can rely on a bit better public transport. In the US, you have private healthcare versus the UK, where it's public healthcare. So there are some nuances there, but I just want to compare the kind of work culture and the entrepreneurial spirit of the US to the UK. In this example, we have someone who's British, who spent 10 days in the US working on their business, and they discovered there is a lot of differences between the US and UK work culture. So the first point is around financial openness, right? Americans are more freely discussing whether it's salary, deals, revenue, how much money they're making, how successful their business is, and all types of entrepreneurial type of endeavors. Whereas in British culture, people are more kind of guarded, right? And what this does effectively in Britain, it kind of keeps things the way it is, right? There's not a lot of discussion on how to make more money, how to collaborate on business ideas. There's not a lot of transparency, and there's not lots of discussion around financial things. It's considered a bit taboo to discuss these type of topics, right? Everyone kind of keeps it to themselves. And I understand that people want to keep privacy about their personal finances, but it leads to an anti-entrepreneurial environment, anti-business type of environment. And that's why in the UK, everything's quite entrenched. It never changes. It's like people are on a hamster wheel of misery, unhappy with their job, the kind of grey weather. They get on with it. It just becomes normality to them. And that's why there's always a kind of downward looking culture in the UK, a lot of crabs in the bucket type of mentality of, oh, this is just the way it is, so we have to just get on with it. And that brings us on to the second point. Another difference between US and UK work culture is the belief in possibility. In America, there is a bit more of the pursuing the American dream and thinking, why not? Whereas in the UK, it's a bit like, why bother? What's the point? Nothing will ever change, right? And as he says here, one culture expands and the other stifles, right? Americans are more focused on innovation, entrepreneurship, taking risks. And the UK, people aren't going to take risks. They're too risk averse, right? They're always dampening ambition, essentially discouraging people from big ideas and taking risks to push boundaries. It's all about, oh, that's just the way it is. Just keep things the way they are, right? Another difference between the US and UK work culture is US, they have a rising tide mentality, as he points out here. Americans celebrate wins with genuine infectious enthusiasm. It's more like let's go, high five, celebrations, high thumos energy, if you're familiar with that term. Brits are kind of cringing, tutting, or which he means is kind of like looking down on, and being full of envy and thinking, oh, who does this person think he is? He's getting above his level, above his class level, above his station in life. One attitude lifts all boats and the other sinks them. And that really is true, right? Because Americans, they are, like I say, you look at even celebrity culture in America, which is kind of upward looking, like, oh, it's aspirational, this person achieved their certain goals, let's celebrate their success. Whereas in the UK, it's kind of, even if you look at the celebrities and the type of people, it's all about, oh, we need to kind of hold them down. There's all this kind of like, oh, if you're in the working class, be in the working class. If you're working a dead end 9 to 5, just get on with it. Go down to the pub and drink beer and kind of live this low class lifestyle. It's not about lifting people up. They're not celebrating collective growth or motivation. As it says here, envy, looking down on people. This is quite common in UK culture. They don't want people to break out of their social class, to break out of where they're stuck, right? And even if you do, I would recommend just, in general, I would say in both countries now, because the US is kind of has this bit more of a socialist culture because of the last 4 years and things like that, is that always be careful who you're sharing information with, particularly in the UK, but generally speaking, because people aren't happy for other people's success. Just generally speaking, many people aren't taking the risks to try to win at life. They're living this boring average life, and if you're doing something that's not a boring average life, they're going to judge you, and rather than try to participate and join in with you, they're going to try and look down on you and see how they can use the information you have to benefit their own life or passive aggressively compete with you. So just be aware of that. Now, point number 4, learning focus. Every win shared triggered rapid fire questions. So if someone was successful in the US, people would ask questions. Oh, what worked? How did you do it? Can you teach me? It's about studying success and British people suspect it. And that's true. In the UK, people are suspicious of other people doing well. Like I say, they don't see any positive aspect of it. It's always like, why did he get that and not me? That's the type of mentality. Whereas Americans are a bit like, oh, this guy's making money on his new business venture. How can I do something similar but my own way? Things like that, right? So there's more curiosity when it comes to success in America, whereas in the UK, they don't acquire skills as quickly. They don't make as quick improvements because of that type of suspicion, and it leads to them missing opportunities. Now, point number 5 is around risk tolerance. Failure in America is proof you took a big swing or big opportunity and missed this time. In the UK, if you make a mistake, it's like a generational stain. It's like you failed the family, failed your community in a sense, and it'll kind of be swept behind closed doors. You're a loser, and no one's going to let you take an opportunity again without being highly critical. So America scales, America improves, whereas Britain tends to stagnate, and that's true. Here we've got a quote: all 6 of the most valuable companies in the US, all of which were worth more than 1 trillion, have been created in the last 50 years. By contrast, no European company valued at more than 100 billion has been started in that period, right? So it just shows there is a massive contrast on the success and innovation within US compared to European countries, broadly speaking, right? Which would include the UK. And it really does make you think, like, what is so different about the US and the UK or Europe? And I do think it's culture, because you can say, well, they're both Western countries, they're both English-speaking countries, they both have a lot of money to invest in governments that could back them in terms of subsidies. But in the UK and EU is more about just keeping things the way they are, keep them things chugging along, right? Why is it that America always has the innovation, or more often than not in the West, when it comes to Elon Musk and electric cars, when it comes to iPhones, smartphones, things like that? And I think there is a combination there between the entrepreneurial innovation spirit of those Americans, but also the government and the deep state, if we want to use that term, who kind of provides funding at the back end to have these type of innovations that help their military, help their surveillance state, and help innovate, right? Which is something you just don't have to the same extent in these other countries. Now, the 6th point is speed of execution. Let's make it happen is the attitude in the US, jumping on a call, referring people through networks, action first mentality. UK is being realistic, right? Listing the problems first, worst case scenario, every reason not to try, and the US tend to ship and get things done, whereas the UK tends to shuffle. And you can see some of the views on these tweets, right? This has 2.4 million views. So many people are agreeing with this, right? It's not, and it has 17,000 likes. So many people are agreeing with these type of comments, right? It's not like a fringe view. And the thing is, and I have noticed that, I've worked with Americans, I worked in America for about half a year or so when I was working in the sales and trading division of an investment bank in Midtown in New York. So I'm kind of aware of how the culture differs. I work with people currently through online business ventures with many people from different countries, and the US definitely have a mentality that is completely like no other. Even people who are more junior, maybe they're in their mid-20s and they're figuring out their life, they're just built different. That's the truth. The Americans are built different, and there's so many things you can learn from their entrepreneurial spirit. Whereas other countries, they have different vibes. Some countries are more chill and laid back. Britain, in my experience, is just quite a generally negative place. But there are different attitudes, and I do think Americans do win for a reason, right? They have an action-first mentality. They ensure swift decision-making and networking and implementing ideas, and it really does give them a competitive edge compared to the UK. UK is always overthinking, hesitating, over-analysis paralysis, delays, and you see this even in major investment banks. Everything's moving super slow. There's so many layers of approval. Americans are taking action first. They're getting things done. The UK is permanently like overthinking things, and opportunities pass them by. You see this all the time when it comes to even within major investment banks where I've worked, right? Where to get one business project moving forward, there's so many layers of approval. Everyone's identifying all the problems. And I understand when you're doing a business project, you need to be able to plan to a certain extent and plan ahead for any issues, right? Build the systems that you need to build to support a new trading venture. develop relationships with the important clients that are going to help provide the initial revenue. But there's so much overthinking and focusing on the negative rather than the positive, which is just a really toxic British mentality. I don't see it elsewhere to the same extent. Now, point number 7 is following the money. Britain is losing nearly 10,000 millionaires this year. The US is gaining 4,000. Capital flows where it's respected, not resented. The UK, because it recently introduced a socialist government through the Labour Party, and also when you look at even when they did have a more right-wing conservative leadership for the last 14 years, it's not really pro-business. They're not really pushing business ventures. They're not supporting small businesses. There's more red tape, more bureaucracy, more laws and regulation on what you can and can't do, what information you can collate from your clients, things like that. You have to report it to data protection services, all these type of ridiculous rules that you just can't move forward in your life, right? And it ends up creating just kind of this vicious cycle of a lack of growth and just being stagnant, right? Whereas the US has a virtuous cycle where they're constantly improving and growing, right? Generally speaking. And because they do respect and reward success, they're not suspicious of success. And in the UK, when you have wealth, you're kind of viewed with resentment. They kind of look down on talent and resources. Everyone's stuck in a very low vibrational energy and a lack of progress type of dynamic, right? And this brings us to the key point here, which is the cost of British cynicism, right? Markets are shrinking while US markets grow, the talent's leaving, people are moving. If you're not aware, not only are the millionaires moving out the country, 10,000 millionaires this year, there are also, as it says, 4,000 new millionaires going to the US from all over the world. But many UK employees who are not millionaires, but they're maybe in that higher skilled range, high skilled white collar work, let's just say between 150 to 300, 400K in terms of their annual salary, working in finance, law, things like that. Many people are in that range. They're fed up with the high 45% income tax. They're looking at countries like the UAE, right? Dubai, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, working abroad, paying less tax, getting a higher salary. It's like a win, right? If you work in Dubai compared to the UK, you're going to get a salary increase. You're going to get a much lower income tax. So it's like, what have you got to lose? There might be slightly higher living costs compared to depending where you're living in London, but it's not, you've got nothing to lose from leaving the UK. The only thing the UK has really is, to a certain extent, some investment banks, some big four accounting firms, Deloitte, KPMG, and some legal firms and things like that, and some tech industries. But there's nothing like really unique or innovative that is setting Britain apart from the rest of the world now, right? The Britain is basically, or third world living, I should say, like at first world prices. So you're having like third world living standards, everything's getting worse and worse, but you're paying first world prices for it, and it doesn't really justify it. You could live a more chill life in somewhere like Spain and not have much progress in your life or your career, but at least you live a better quality of life day to day compared to the UK. Or you could go and, like really pursue a high powered career in places that are growing, like UAE, Dubai, places like that. So the cost of British cynicism is just people are leaving, companies are leaving, or they stay small because you get big and the tax and the bureaucracy kind of makes it more difficult to succeed, right? And there's a little quote here. The next 4 years are going to be the biggest A-B split test that we've ever seen. And split testing, if you're not aware, is a term in marketing where, for example, you have two sales pages, page A that has a particular design, sales page B that has another design, and then you push these out to your clients 50% each, and you see which is attracting more people to buy your product. So you have, like I say, two different approaches. Now here we have two different approaches. The UK is going to focus on big government, high tax, a command economy, which is like a socialist economy with a big government who's taking care of so many industries and high taxes, like it says here, versus the US with Trump and the kind of shift there, the smaller government, lower taxes, free market economy, more focus on entrepreneurship and business. And we're going to see, it's obvious that America is going to do better than the UK under these type of conditions. You don't really need to be a genius to kind of figure that out. Now, the UK is going to get rapidly worse over the next 4 to 5 years, and the US is going to get rapidly better. Now, to what extent? Of course, that can vary. I don't think the US is going to make any miracles over the next couple of years, but it will get better than it currently is, right? And this is the steady beating of progress, right? Progress is going in one direction. Time is keep passing. Things keep getting worse. Nothing's really improving. All you have in the UK is this perpetual pandering to whatever the latest agenda is. The conflict in Eastern Europe, which we can't speak about, where they have to support a particular country, supporting the rainbow flag, supporting certain ethnic groups or religions out of a sense of equality, supporting gender equality for the sake of it. Now we're going to assess a bit more about what's going on in terms of UK general culture. Here we have an instance where a family from Philadelphia or Chicago, they were spent time in Philadelphia and Chicago, and then they moved to London briefly, and they talk about London culture. London, I would say, generally doesn't have a positive environment, right? Although you might hear fancy things about it in terms of tourism to a certain extent. So it mentions here in this particular quote, "We've travelled the world, but we've never felt such coldness as we did in London. In a week, there was not a single smile. No one on the street or on the trains was smiling. Our kids, who are used to warm waves and friendly interactions, found it quite unsettling." They then posted a video showing their children getting on an escalator and asking whether Londoners are really mean, right? Because this is the general vibe that comes across in London. If you live in London, the politest thing you can do in a crowded public space is keep quiet and ignore everyone. While in America, people tend to be a bit more open to chatting with strangers than English rush hour etiquette, which is the same as in a city such as New York. So just generally speaking, like I say, London isn't a positive environment for business or people in general. It's kind of transactional. People are always thinking about how they can screw each other over. If we're being real, no one typically cares. Everyone's trying to walk over other people. There is an F you pay me type of mentality. And what she says here about, people kind of keeping to themselves, not smiling, avoiding other people, this is just what it's become now as a culture. Now, in this video, we're going to cover someone who moved out the UK and moved to Thailand, where he's been living for around 10 years. So he's not like a recent expat. He's been there for significant time periods and he makes visits back to the UK. He does different work. He did some work around web developing and then social media marketing. So he has a variety of different experiences. Let's listen to why he left the UK, and it further emphasizes the point, the benefits of US work culture or even work culture in general outside the UK.
One of the main reasons that I left the UK is that as an independent person, as somebody who, doesn't want to work for somebody else, who's never liked working a 9 to 5, doesn't like taking orders, bit of a rebel. One big problem with living in the UK is it's very difficult to prosper and to be independent, okay? Unless you have a ton of money, unless you come from a very, very wealthy background, you always have to kind of, go along with the system. You're forced to work a 9 to 5. It costs an incredible amount of money to start a business. And if you want to start an online business like I've done, it's very, very difficult to do so because you can't really take the time out of your life to pursue your goals, your dreams, your ambitions, whatever, okay? And that's because you're always working a 9 to 5, and you have to work a 9 to 5 because you have to earn so much money in the UK just to survive, just to live, just to pay your bills, just to pay your rent. So by the time you've gone to work in the morning, by the time you're back at 6 p.m, you have no energy. You can't really start an online business in the UK without extreme struggle and extreme difficulty.
This is someone who's successful, and he left the UK for Thailand and he's built a successful online income source for himself, right? And this really tells you how the UK is not really pro-business, not pro-small business, doesn't allow people who don't want to conform to the traditional kind of 9 to 5 lifestyle. It's very dependent on people being stuck and running in place, running on the spot, being like a hamster wheel going round and around again, and not escaping the kind of class system, right? And he's very true on what he's saying here, the kind of general grey depressing vibe, being quite risk averse, crabs in a bucket mentality. These are all common things about the UK work culture compared to the US and elsewhere.
In the UK, there is so much regulation, there is so much taxation. The government is so overbearing in places like the UK. I think it's very similar for Canada and Australia and things like that. I honestly believe that these systems are set up, like I said before, it's very difficult to get ahead. The system is against you and it's set up to prevent you getting ahead. It wants you to be a part of the system, and it doesn't want you to break out. And we see this in various different forms. Okay, with there's so many taxes. There's council taxes. There's TV licenses in the UK. There's a license. There's a tax for absolutely anything and everything. You know, if you leave your car in the wrong place, you've got to pay a huge fine. You've got to pay like a £60 fine in the UK. That is absolutely insane. In comparison, in Thailand, it's literally nothing. I live out here. I pay my rent. I pay my electric. I pay the water. I was going to say I think the landlord covers the water. No, I cover the water. I pay my phone and my internet. That's it. And then I have to sort my visas out. Those are the only expenses I have. I don't even have to worry about parking tickets. In Thailand, if I can just leave my bike wherever I want, you never really get a ticket. I had a ticket one time and it cost me 200 baht, which was equivalent of about £5. Okay, so all of these obstacles and all these things that are put in your way in the UK to kind of pin you down, to hold you down, you know, they just don't exist out here. And I honestly believe that they're designed to keep you down. So the second reason I'm never going to go back to the UK is because I honestly feel like the system is against you. The system is there to oppress you. Maybe it wasn't designed that way, but it's evolved into this beast of oppression. And it just makes you feel trapped. It makes you feel like there's no way out. There is a way out. You can.
So he's got a good point here, right? In terms of regulation, taxation, points I've been raising. And when you do think about these things, typically, you know, particularly as an individual man, people tend to gaslight you. Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, just get on with things. That's what people say, but you really can sense it. You can sense the general negativity, anti-business environments, all these type of ridiculous health and safety laws if you're hiring other employees, data collection laws. And they're setting you up to fail or to fine you. There's so many rules, it's inevitable that some people will end up breaking some of those laws in very minor infractions. If you run a small business and you collect some client information, maybe you don't store it the right way, then they try to fine you if they find out. Things like that, right? And the thing is, like I say, they're setting you up to fail. And what he's saying is correct. The system is designed to crush you and control you. It's not designed to help you flourish, right? Because the system sees any level of success as a threat. And what they do with a lot of this regulation is to protect oligopolies. Some people think, why is there so much regulation in the finance industry, things like that? Yeah, I guess part of it is to protect consumers and investors, but a lot of it is to maintain the oligopoly, right? Which is oligopolies like a monopoly, but with multiple companies, if you weren't aware, like a cartel. So you have the banking cartel, all the banks, you have the top 5 banks. There's no chance other people can really compete with this, even if they're disruptors, and they might be able to do that at a very small level. At the big level, it's a rigged game, right? There's a raised barrier to entry, and that's the purpose of all these regulations, to disincentivize you from starting your own business and doing your own thing. And there is that meme, you've probably seen it for the UK, oi mate, do you have a license for that? There literally is a license for everything in the UK, and that's what I mean. If you don't have a license for all sorts of business activities, then it kind of deters you from being able to engage in that. And then you need, like, they recently introduced licenses, this is completely ridiculous, where if you own an apartment, for example, you need to, not only do you have to do the normal things like have maybe the relevant insurance, have the relevant kind of electric coverage, or coverage that everything's safe, the electric, the heat, and all the different appliances in your home. You have the relevant fire alarms and smoke alarms, things like that. There's an additional license you need now, where you have to inform the local council, the local government, that you're renting out your apartment, and you have to pay them like an annual fee, which is completely ridiculous. It's your apartment or your home, you own it. Why do you have to pay another fee on top of that to the local government that you're renting out your own apartment to Airbnb or to other clients, whoever you want to rent out your apartment to as a landlord? This is the level of ridiculously, right? You need a license for everything. And this brings me down to my final point, which is the type of culture that you have in Europe and in the West, where it's all outside of the US, where it's all about it's a very socialist mindset. And what we're looking at here is the law of Janti, which is basically this kind of Danish, Norwegian concept that came up in a book, but it kind of reflects this humility, conformity, discouraging individual success, which you see outside of the US, right? In terms of these EU work culture. Folk says things like, you're not anything special, you're not as good as us, you're not smarter than us, don't think you're better than us, you're not to think you know more than us. Everything's about making you feel small and not competing in a healthy way. It's focusing on equality. team-orientated decision-making, not the smartest people, coming to the right decisions, taking leadership roles, taking risks. All these things that you need for success is all about kind of being stuck in the same dead-end situation. Whereas the US is more focused on individual achievements, taking those risks, innovating, and really having strong leadership and stronger personalities. And my experience working in the US and working in the UK is in the US, people do have those stronger personalities, and there were many studies done when they compared education levels between the US and other countries. And one thing they noticed about maybe the US education system isn't great, but all the American people are generally a lot more confident and outspoken compared to people or young people outside the US. And that's very true. They're way more confident. And that really is a testament to US culture. I'm not saying it's perfect. I know the US has a bunch of issues right now to deal with, but there really are many benefits to being there if you want to start your own business and be in a more healthy, business-friendly environment. So I've worked in the finance industry for over a decade, Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, sales and trading, investment banking roles. I offer career advice for my clients. There's a link in the description if you want to speak with me directly. I'd definitely be happy to help you and navigate some of these workplace dysfunctions that you might have to deal with. Let me know in the comments how you feel about work culture in the US compared to elsewhere. 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, and I'll see you next time.